Paula Pete Works here, coming to you once again with One Piece chapter 1122 entitled The Time Is at Hand. So, the magazine is on break after this week. This is also the final week of the manga series known as My Hero Academia. It finishes this week. Congrats to Horikoshi. Oh boy, it's been a ride. It's been going for 10 years. That's insane. And in the author notes, Oda is congratulating Horikoshi on completing My Hero Academia, which has been running for 10 years. I did not know that. My goodness, how the time flies. Because I remember when that first got started and I read the first chapter and I remember being really enthralled by All Might. I did not really keep up with it that much. I know my co-host on the Rose Skull podcast, Zach, really does like it. So yeah, I mean, shout out to Horikoshi. You did finish it up, bruh. I can't say how well received it's been, but I'm glad he did at least finish. With that being said, that brings us to the art request. Oda redraws Smoker from some fan art Horikoshi sent in 22 years ago. W-Mans. The sad part, and I found this out on Reddit, but the sad part is that in the whole 10 years that My Hero Academia has been running, Smoker has not been relevant. The last time Smoker was even remotely relevant, he was getting his smoky behind beat down in the dirt by Virgo, and then he was used as a couch by Doflamingo with his infamous butt hockey. That's not totally canon, but that's just a funny way to think that he was using hockey on his butt to seal Smoker to the ground, and then of course Kuzan comes in to save Smoker, yada yada. But that's incredible. What's also very funny, and this is sad, we talk about this on the Rose Skull podcast a lot, I talked about it in my videos, but what's sad and funny about Smoker is that when the series first starts, right, and you're in Logtown, you think that Smoker is going to be the Zenigata to Luffy's Lupin III. You think he's going to chase him all across the world. In the chapter in which Smoker gets referenced, thanks to Horikoshi liking him as a character, I think this is his favorite character, Kobe has a flashback of when he and Luffy met on Alvida's ship. And it is in this chapter where he declares, I have to stop you from achieving your dream. So in this chapter, no holds barred, no shenanigans. Kobe becomes the Zenigata. Kobe replaces Smoker for real in this chapter. The chapter before My Hero Academia goes away. That's crazy, bruh. That is devious work. Oh my god. Oh, I'm so sorry, Horikoshi. Oh no. Smoker is a fraud, bruh. I got a short about that coming up soon on the channel. Stay tuned, because there's some funny stuff about him I found. But man, Kobe is chilling with his wife and I guess his brother-in-arms, Prince Groose, in the hospital bed. And that's what he says this after reminiscing about Luffy. So we're done. We're actually done. There is no coming back from this, brother. Smoker is washed. He's out with the laundry, bro. I apologize. I am so sorry. But man, I gotta tell you, even when I was a child watching One Piece for the first time on the Fox box, I thought Smoker, who was called Chaser at the time because 4Kids editing and censoring and whatnot, but I thought he was the coolest thing in the world, and he remains cool because his power isn't offensive, so he has to make up the difference with hockey, and I found that brilliant. And he has the Sea Stone Jute, which was the first time we saw a Sea Stone weapon in the series, and that's cool. But man, all of that just falls apart, bruh. None of that matters. And the art request looks so cool, but man, that don't matter. Anyway, people from around the world are very responsive to Vegapunk's message. We hear them in Dressrosa. We see them in Impel Down. I think we're seeing them too on the pirate island. The pirates are jazzed. The Marines are worried. The townsfolk are worried. But yeah, it's a new age of pirates all over again, which leads into a very, very interesting speech by Buggy, in which he gives even more bravado to his men in saying it's our world, not my world. And that tosses the entire outfit of Empty Bluffs into a frenzy. However, Crocodile and Mihawk are not pleased, and Crocodile tells Buggy to sit down, which makes me think this is the start of where the scheming is going to take place, in which they're going to be like, okay, if you're serious about this, we need to start making money moves. We need to start making power plays because we ain't got jack right now in order to actually find the One Piece. Because if you think about it, they're the only group that doesn't have any poneglyph rubbings, as far as I know. So, yeah, which is very funny because we have a character in this organization who is very intimate with poneglyphs, even though he can't read them. So I just find that an interesting thing to take note of. But then we shoot back to Van Augur, Devon, and Caribou. And then Devon is on the phone with Blackbeard, and she's like, I could just kill him right now if you want, Commodore. And Blackbeard says, nah, I'll deal with him depending on how good his information is. Now, here's the tricky part. I hope we're holding out for a prayer now, because we don't see any of these characters this chapter, and I'll go through them as we move forward. But we don't see York. I hope Caribou has captured York, because it was so weird that she was left alone. Either he captured York or they took York. Because it's still weird to think about, why did they come to Egghead in the first place? Touching Saturn and getting Caribou were all just coincidences. There have to be some sort of reason why they came to Egghead. There has to be a reason why. So I hope we find that out, because them showing up is weird. Especially these two in particular, who would be really, really good for a very covert mission, seeing as how we have the powers of cloning, basically, with the dog fruit Model 9 Tail Fox, and we have the power of teleportation with the warp fruit. So it's weird. And then, of course, Caribou kind of fits that bill because he has the power of infinite space thanks to the bog fruit. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. And it's very weird. And I've touched upon this a lot, but it's weird that his powers are so similar to Blackbeard's, because they're the only Logias that store stuff. Very odd. And they're the only Logias that have a very interesting relationship with their regeneration, because more things go into Caribou than there are things that separate Caribou that makes them come back together. And of course, Blackbeard doesn't take in things well at all. He takes double the damage because he takes in everything, right? But he feels everything he takes in. So they both take in stuff. One just feels what he takes in, and he feels it double than a regular person would. And the other, he's just a bog, so it just sinks into his infinite body. So that's just an interesting parallel there. However, I'm wondering how the Cross Guild is going to move forward from here. And I didn't notice too, there are women in Cross Guild. There are just regular women pirates. So that's cool. I didn't know that. But moving on. I really just want to touch upon this particular hockey business that I found particularly interesting. So Emeth, the giant robot, takes out a wind knot. If you don't know, during the time in which the time skip was about to pop off, we get glimpses of where all the Straw Hats are, right? Nami was on a place called Witheria. Witheria was run by all these wizards headed by Harides. Harides, I've often said, could be a former deity of Burka, because we find out, I think in the SBS, that he is a Birkin. He's the old man who dresses in blue and he looks like a wizard, right? So that guy, right? And he goes and explains all the weather technology to Nami. And one of the pieces of weather technology that he explains is an item called a wind knot, which is a rope. And depending on how many times you tie the rope, it depends on how powerful the wind will be when the knots are untied. So that's cool within itself. It's even cooler when you consider that Harides within the previous chapter. And that was the first chapter since Lunarians were introduced that we have all the winged races together, Harides being our Birkin representative. So that's cool in itself. However, this kind of confirms a lot of thoughts I have had. So, at the end of the chapter, we find out that Joy Boy sealed his Conqueror's Haki within this wind knot. This also lets us know that however wind knots are formed, they have been around for a long time. Centuries upon centuries, in fact. So that's just an interesting thing too to make note of. It's also interesting that they can remain around for years and years without decaying. So that's cool in itself too. But moving on. So this confirms some things we knew already. One, Haki can be sealed within items even after the user's death. That's how we get a black sword such as Shusui, right? I don't know, based on Luffy being the one who sees the item, if the rope is blackened. But in the way that it's shaded, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that it is supposed to be blackened, because it looks pretty dark. So I guess it's shaded enough to show that it is a tied rope without being unreadable. This is a visual medium. It is a comic. So you have to portray things as they're supposed to be. So I guess it's shaded as much as it can be to keep the portrayal of it being a tied rope. Fine. Cool. And it's a pretty big rope now that I'm looking at it again, because it's in the hands of Emeth, and Emeth is huge. So, okay. This is under the same principles as Shusui, which was the sword of Ryuma, right? This lets us know in a way that it's very possible that in order to make a black blade, Conqueror's Haki is most likely involved. This also lets us know that when you imbue Haki into an item that has an effect, it greatly increases the effect of that item. Because looking at the wind knot here and what we know about wind knots, and this could just be because of its size, but it seems to be only tied one time, and being tied once is the weakest setting. So for it to be tied once and to do what it did is very interesting in itself. It kind of lets you know how powerful Joy Boy is. But to move forward, I made a video a while ago saying that the black ship that the man marked by flames is on is most likely a ship permanently coated in Haki, which is why it can make the whirlpools. Seeing as how things as big as this can be coated in Haki, and seeing as how Joy Boy seems to be from his silhouette just to be like a regular human, I'm going to go out on the limb and say it's very possible for someone to coat their entire ship in Haki, and then that ship is the thing that's creating the whirlpools that can sink enemy ships. That's what I'm thinking. On top of that, what's super interesting about what the wind knot does when it's released is that it sends every Gorosei, I mean, other than Marcus Mars and Saturn, back to Mary Joas, and Imu is panting on the floor. Now, a couple of things about this. Well, more than a couple, but what this Conqueror's Haki burst does is that it knocks out all the Marines, it puts the Vice Admirals on the back foot, and then it dispels the Devil Fruit powers of the elders who are present, that being Jupiter, Nusjuro, Saturn, and Warcree. So I could believe, based on the nature of Haki itself and it being able to blast through Devil Fruit defenses like Luffy's rubber body, which is a Zoan ability, and it can blast through the flowing bodies of Locust, it makes sense that a Haki burst of a great magnitude would be able to reset Zoan Fruit users. Like, that to me makes a lot of sense. It also makes a lot of sense that said ability could dispel effects that were put in place by a Devil Fruit. What do I mean by that? Well, the only Gorosei who made it to the island was Saturn, right? Saturn was in the general vicinity of the island. So even though I think the rings created by Saturn are a Saturn ability, like those are his ability, it makes sense that he was not sent back to Mary Joas because he's touched down on the island. However, all the other members of the five elders were teleported via his magic circles. So it, in a way, makes sense that the magic that was used to bring them here was dispelled by a hockey burst. It makes sense to me, at least, because I've been hearing, or rather reading, a lot of takes online to say that Emu has something to do with any of the actions of the five elders. And I don't think that's real. I don't think that's true, because from the way that the powers are depicted, especially with the magic circles, it's highly implied that this is all Saturn's doing, because he teleports from his position on his ship to the island via magic circle. So that lets me know, and it lets anyone else reading it know, that that is an ability of Saturn. And then when he summons the Gorosei to Egghead, that again is an ability of Saturn's. So it makes sense that when the hockey burst is initiated, it just resets all effects, period. So if you are brought here under any means other than conventional means, you are sent back to where you came from. I'm not sure if this actually reaches Marcus Mars. It could have reached him, because what's very funny is that when we see all the girls say back in Mary Joas, he's the first one there. So he could have caught it while he was flying through the air and was sent back that way. But what's funny about this is that he's sitting down, and we learn from the SBS he never gets to sit down because he never has his homework prepared for the meetings. So I find that very funny that he's the first one there and he's sitting down. That's hilarious to me. But I don't know. I'm thinking that this hockey release is just a big dispel of all the Delphi effects in the area who are malicious, if that makes sense. Now, as far as Emu is concerned, which, interesting thing to point out too, the weird servant that people have brought up is also present in this chapter, because they yell out "Great Emu." So they're reacting to Emu on their knees, panting to the release of hockey. And I think it's just the release of hockey that has Emu shook. It's not so much anything to do with any power that Emu put out being dispelled. I don't think that at all. I think Emu just has great observation or what have you, and can sense Joy Boy's presence. That's what I think. Because that to me would make sense, and it would make sense why Emu is so shook. Because this is, well, technically this is an effect of Conqueror's Haki. So when you feel someone's Conqueror's Haki and it gives you this reaction, you would do what Emu is doing here. You would kneel down on the floor and start panting if you aren't just knocked out. So no, that makes sense to me. No, it makes sense to me that this is just a reaction to the hockey in a way that strong characters have reacted to bursts before. I think it just means more for Emu because it's a burst unleashed by their mortal enemy or what have you. So it makes sense. It makes sense. However, with that, Saturn is the only Gorosei member, the only five elders member left on the island. So as he stands in front of Emeth, I'm not sure where this is going to go, because the Straw Hats are leaving, it seems, with the Giants. So I'm not sure if he's going to honor his promise to York. I'm not sure if York's even still there. Another interesting thing about characters being tied up, we know that Lilith is on the ship. Who else I think is on the ship is Stussy, because I don't think Stussy stuck around. It really doesn't make sense narratively. So either she's going to fly over to the Straw Hat ship as a vampire bat and then just turn back into her normal form, or she's a stowaway already. That's what I'm banking on. I'm banking on Batcoin super duper hard. But to get to the remembrance of Joy Boy and Emeth, well, Joy Boy is wearing a straw hat, it seems. I don't really know how big Joy Boy is, though. It looks as though Joy Boy is a normal human. Of course, you know, we have that giant straw hat in Emu's possession at the moment, but I don't really know what that means. What's also very interesting about Emeth is that he has X's on his arms. This is a cool callback to when in Alabasta, the Straw Hat crew put X's on their arms to show that they were real and not Mr. Two. And it's a bond of friendship because, of course, they all hold up their arms in the air as they leave Alabasta, leaving Vivi behind. So I wonder if with Emmet having an X on both of his arms, does it carry the same sort of bond of friendship with Joy Boy that it carried with, I guess you could say, two D Clan members back in Alabasta, Monkey D. Luffy and Nefertiti D. Vivi? It's a very interesting thought, especially, yeah, given the context that Vivi has found out to be a D now, you know? So, man, yeah, now it's even more interesting, too, because as you may or may not know, if you've been paying attention, Luffy now has a permanent X over his heart, and his heart is the power source of Gear 5th. And it's very interesting, too. It's been the power source for a lot of things in the series, really, with Gear 4th being the only odd man out because, of course, his heart pumped blood really fast in Gear 2. The air from Gear 3rd was always present in the trunk of the body before it went to a limb, which that was interesting how he would inflate his hand. Then when he wanted another limb to be inflated, the air would circulate back to the trunk and then go to another body part. And then, of course, now in Gear 5th, he really focuses on his heartbeat. His heartbeat activates the drum of liberation, and then he becomes an awakened Zoan, becoming Nika. So yeah, it's funny, like, yeah, the only transformation that doesn't have any sort of heart-related thing going on is Gear 4th. Gear 4th is just a hockey-based transformation. So that in itself is very interesting. But yeah, I don't know if Vivi will get an X on herself in the future. That's something to look out for. Maybe she will, because it would be kind of cool for both of the D members to have X's on their person. I don't know, bruh. It would be. But yeah, the best part about this is Emmet is a funny baby and he can emote. And I like that a lot. It's also very interesting that in this flashback, he's wearing clothes, which makes me think, I wonder, based on how many comparisons I've made between him and Oars, I wonder if he is a homie, because it would make a lot of sense if a Soul Fruit user in the past, maybe an ally of Joy Boy, under some circumstance, took a piece of Joy Boy's soul and put it in this automaton. And now this automaton is anthropomorphized. It's a living thing. But seeing as how it's a robot and homies are very strange, it can outlast the test of time and live up to this point, but still be under the weight of real world circumstances, like being able to rust and whatnot. I wonder, because it's weird that he can emote and he has a sense of humor and all this going on, because it's not a hockey based automaton, because hockey doesn't give life. So maybe the reason why he is how he is because of the Soul Fruit, and then seeing as how he has a piece of Joy Boy in him, he would only come back online when Joy Boy is active again. That's reaching a bit, because I know they do say he works off of a power source and they don't know what's powering him, yet he was activated by the drums of liberation. So maybe he is under some weird circumstances in which his activity is solely tied to the person whom soul he has, and once something reminiscent of the person that he has within him comes back, he activates. It's a bit of a logic puzzle here. I'm not sure how Emmet is working. I do like that he has a little smiley face though. That's good. But I don't know what to really think about him at this moment. There are a lot of things swirling in my head as to what he could be. What's also very interesting, I'll probably bring this up in a short or a quick works video as I'm calling them now, but what's super interesting about Emmet's design is that we get a very similar design way back in Wapple's cover story, because one of the first toys he designs looks a lot like Emmet. He just has like a Trojan helmet instead of like a Viking helmet, which is really interesting. I don't know if that's supposed to go anywhere, but yeah, it looks like a little baby version of Emmet. So that's kind of cool. I still don't know what the X is on his back, but now it's pretty thematic, seeing as how he has X's on his arms, which gives me a Frankie vibe as well. A little bit, now that I'm looking at him. And, you know, it's giving me a general Frankie vibe, too. I don't know. That's an interesting thought. So we'll have to see what becomes of all of this. But so far, I'm really liking the implications brought to us by this wind knot because it kind of really starts to set in stone how these Haki objects come to be. I've heard other people say that it's related to death solely or whatever, and that's clearly not the case because Joy Boy puts Haki into this thing while he's alive. So, and it stays blackened apparently for hundreds of years. So, death isn't necessarily a requirement for these things to work. They just last after the person who has put the Haki on it has long since passed, like Black Blades do. So, yeah, it's giving the impression that Haki sealing is exclusive to Conquerors, which is cool. And it kind of falls in line with what we expect out of the series at this point. That Conquerors is the one Haki above all others and is the one that can apparently beat all others too. Because remember, and we get this from Film Red, but apparently this is a canonical thing, Shanks using Conquerors can dupe Future Sight from observation Haki users, meaning you can't see into his future because his Conquerors is just that good. So that in itself is very interesting. But with that being said, that's all I have here today. Interesting chapter. We got a break next week. I will continue to provide everyone with content as I always do during break weeks. But yeah, give me your thoughts. Really, really lore heavy chapter. I like it though.